Hello, guys. David Vos here again. It's another beautiful day. Man, oh man, they just keep coming. Still haven't had any snow. It's just really warm, like in the 50s outside. Something's really changing. Really, something's up. Because it's not that the earth is getting warmer. I know it's getting colder in a lot of other areas. Of course, I have seen some interesting things with some radar lines that looks like they're manipulating it with radar beams and so forth. So that's probably what's going on. Guys, I hope you're having a wonderful day. It is a beautiful day to have a wonderful day. Well, guys, I want to talk to you about something because not just something. This is like everything. This is like the meaning of life. Now, if you were going to tell people what the meaning of life is, and you only had a paragraph, well, you'd be pretty constrained. But I'm going to do it in a way, and it'd probably take me more than a paragraph, but I'm going to do it in a way and start off from the point of view of our language and why we're even talking. Because language is words that we use to try and express what we are inside, what we're feeling. Now, what we're feeling could be something as mundane as, I don't feel good, I got to get up and go to work, and, I lost my keys or whatever. But what I mean is not just how you're feeling at the moment, but your inner desire to live. Why? What is it we're supposed to be doing as far, not just in your mundane life, but what is your soul doing? Why are you here? And where is here? And, this probably gets deep because we've got to know what consciousness is and what deity really is. And we're gonna prove from the Bible what deity and our soul and our life and our path is today. Why we're here. Not just from somebody's point of view they wrote in a book, but from the reality. And the reality of what you are is really what's written in the book. But you don't know that. And you have never known that there's any way to prove that. This is the best way to prove the Bible's inspired. And not only that, but the Bible is not some lone wolf. It's not just some revelation that was written 2,000 years ago in one little bitty book. Early Christians were Gnostic, mystery schools, the Greek mysteries, the Sibylline oracles. The early Christians had in their canon, they read the Sibylline oracles. The early Christian, we've gone through all of this about Artemis and Eleusinian mysteries and the Dionysius turning the water into wine and all the similarities that we see in all the temples across the world with Jesus. And we've talked about how Heliopolis was where Jesus and John the Baptist were originally preaching. They preached also at Karnak, and that's where Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, which is the Jebel Musa, which is the Arabian way of saying the mountain of Moses, or Horeb, that's in the Sinai Peninsula, just east of the east-facing temple, Karnak, facing east, so that when the sun rises up over the mountain, the spring equinox that marks exactly, that mountain marks it exactly, Horeb, where Elijah went, where Moses went to Mount Horeb, where Jesus went. And in the New Testament, it's called the Mount of Olives, but that is a mountain that was known for thousands of years, came from the original teachings there at the great temple, the temple of the Lord, Isaiah 19:19, that was in the midst of Egypt and at the border thereof, which is the pillar of Enoch, which is our Messiah, who was the Son of Man, who would be reborn as the Messiah one day, who was also in the Egyptian teachings, the Thoth. And the Greeks called him Hermes, and there's other various names for this individual. It's Enoch. He's the one who went to heaven, got all this information about the stars, and then wrote it in the Great Pyramid. So the Gospel's written in the stars. But notice that the cross is the spring equinox and the fall equinox. He dies on the cross, going down into the darkness in the winter, and rises from the cross in spring. So the cross is the cross beam. The up and down, which goes from the summer to the winter, is the pole or the tree that Jesus died on. The cross beam goes east to west. That's the spring equinox and the fall equinox. That's the cross beam that goes from east to west. So Jesus died at Passover time, Easter, and rose from the dead. He died symbolically at the same time, because it was at the time that he was in the earth, that he was getting ready to be raised up and become immortal, that he acted out on that cross the 3 days and 3 nights that he was in hell. Why 3 days and 3 nights? Well, because, first of all, remember, he's not on the cross 3 days and 3 nights. Okay, in fact, this went on for hours, where he's carrying his cross. Then the soldiers, they put it up, and it takes hours to go through all this excruciating cross death thing. The 3 days and 3 nights is when he's in the heart of the earth. It literally says he's in Hades for 3 days and 3 nights. Or the heart of the earth, or the belly of the whale, like Jonas. That's a specific time, the 3 days and 3 nights. The time he's on the cross, though, is represented from the time that we go down into this darkness at the autumn equinox, all the way down the entire bottom of the wheel until you come up out of there at dawn on the spring equinox. And that's the period of the cross. So the two places that cross beam meets is the spring and the fall equinox. Remember, Jesus rose from the dead at dawn. Now, that much we know. Because the calendar, the hour that he was crucified and all that, could be two different things. It could be a Roman calendar, or a Greek calendar, or an Armenian calendar, Hebrew or something. Could be going by the Jewish holidays. We don't really know what the third hour is. There's so many different options. But if he was in the grave 3 days exactly and 3 nights, and he rose at dawn, he had to have died at dawn. You're probably aware of the fact that if you look into the Gospels, you'll see that Jesus wasn't actually in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. But it doesn't actually say anywhere in the Bible that he was in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. It says he was in hell, or Hades, or in the heart of the earth, like Jonas, 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale. Now, there's going to be a lot of things we don't know, so we got to stick to what we do know. We absolutely know he rose from the dead at dawn, 6 a.m. If he was in the grave 3 days and 3 nights, he would have had to have died at 6 a.m., 3 days, 3 nights. But remember, the trial is a different time. When he was crucified is a different time. When he dies is a different time. And then when he was put into the tomb is a different time, even if it does represent the time he was in the grave. So he went into the grave at 6 a.m. And that's got to be the 12th hour. That fits with what we're saying, because he gave up the ghost at the 9th hour, and then 3 hours later they put him into the tomb at the 12th hour. But now remember, he's crucified, and 3 hours later it says there was darkness over the whole earth, complete darkness. That has to represent some kind of death. The consciousness of the mind goes out, and it says that it was dark for 3 hours. There's your 3 days and 3 nights. So, though we were still actually alive, going through the halls of Amente, we weren't immortal. We had no more immortality. We were going through these lives in reincarnation. So, they crucify him at the 6th hour. He gives up the ghost at the 9th hour. They put him into the tomb at the 12th hour. So, the entire time from the winter solstice all the way until spring, the spring equinox, is marked by a 3-hour period where the sun dies at the winter solstice, and a period where Jesus, around Passover time, is in a tomb for 3 days and 3 nights. This entire period, the three houses of Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, those are the three houses, the 3 days that he was in the Hall of Amenti, in a symbolic sense. It's hard to tell whether the 3 nights of Amenti, where you go through the halls of Amenti, is those 3 hours that the sun is dead at the winter solstice, or even the 3 days that Jesus is in the grave, or if it's literally the 3 nights of the evolution of the soul, where we're down there going through the halls of Amenti, which probably represents our incarnations through the fish, birds, mammals, and men, all the way up through these 3 days and 3 nights from winter solstice, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and then reborn, coming out of the grave, out of death, at Easter time, spring equinox. But remember, Jesus then dies, not the 12th hour of the day, but the 12th hour of the night. The night starts with the evening and comes to the morning. So the 12th hour of the evening is 6 o'clock in the morning. The 12th hour of the day is 6 o'clock at night when the sun goes down, which is 6 p.m. in the evening. See, 12 hours starts from the evening to the morning. So the 12th hour is the morning, 6 a.m. But he gave up the ghost 3 hours before that. He was crucified 3 hours before that, and the trial was 3 hours before that. So let's put this in perspective. He was on trial with Pilate at the first hour. That would be 6 p.m. He goes 3 hours later, and at the third hour, he's crucified. So that's 9 p.m. would be Scorpio, or the constellation of serpents. So there's where the devil comes in. 3 hours later, at the 6th hour, which would be midnight, it says darkness covered the land. And that's when there's no more light of the sun. The sun dies. So even though it's not for another 3 hours that he gives up his spirit, it does say that there's darkness over the land for 3 hours. So there's darkness for this entire 3 hours. From midnight to 3 a.m. in the morning, there's just darkness all over the land. Since light represents consciousness, Jesus is unconscious for 3 hours and finally gives up the spirit at the 9th hour. From the 6th hour to the 9th hour, then, is the death of Jesus Christ, where he was, the light of his being was dark and had gone out. But here's the problem. Jesus can't die. He's an immortal being. So what we're talking about is his higher consciousness goes out, and now he's at the bottom of the wheel, maybe a fish or a bird, in his incarnations in this animalistic nature. His higher consciousness is completely gone out. And we don't reach any kind of awakening until after 3 a.m., which is all the way to Aquarius, where he meets John the Baptist and is baptized and comes out of that baptism. And then there's Pisces, and then Aries, he's conscious again. His higher consciousness is achieved, and he's got immortality. A lot of people, the modern occult wants to say that's the death of Jesus Christ, 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb. But that's not when he was in the tomb, that's when he died. But wait a minute, Jesus died on Passover. That's in the spring. How do we reconcile this? Well, notice that the wording used in the Bible is he was 3 days and 3 nights in hell, or in Hades. And one place he's likened to being in the belly of the whale 3 days and 3 nights. Now, while the Bible does say, like the Apostle Paul says, is that he rose the third day. He was buried and rose the third day. So that indicates that he was literally 3 days and 3 nights in the grave. But the other terminology is that he will be 3 days and 3 nights like Jonah in the whale, and then it says in the heart of the earth. Okay, so the grave is the heart of the earth, but there was this 3 days and 3 nights that Jesus was in a tomb. And then there is this thing that he's representing, the sun going down. And at the winter solstice, it goes out for 3 days, or literally just 3 hours. And that represents 3 days and 3 nights. And the Bible says that when Jesus was on the cross, it got dark from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. For 3 hours, it was just dark. That would have to represent the time from midnight until 3 a.m. in the morning, where it's just totally dark outside. So remember, it says, another verse says that he descended into the lower regions of the earth. That would be those lower houses at the bottom of the wheel. So what is it that he ascended, but that he also descended first into the lower regions of the earth? Remember when Jesus was already resurrected and they went to touch him, he said, "Touch me not, for I have not yet ascended." So the ascension was going on even after he came out of the tomb. He was in the belly or the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, like Jonah was in the belly of the whale. And he descended first into the lower regions of the earth. So the ascension's got to be something on the top of the wheel. So hence, he went to the grave, but when he came out of the grave, at dawn, he began to ascend. So that's the ascension of the sun rising to the Father's kingdom at the top of the wheel at the summer solstice. But when he descended, that had to have been from Libra all the way down to Capricorn. And the belly of the whale, that's that sea creature, the sea beast, that's Capricorn at the bottom of the wheel. And the 3 days and 3 nights that he was in the belly of the whale was when the sun dies at the winter solstice. So even though he died for 3 hours at the bottom of the wheel or in the heart of the earth, 3 days and 3 nights, he actually, something happened in around October, early November, which is the Scorpio, which the scorpion stings the sun, and it doesn't go completely out, but it begins to go out. So remember, at the first hour, Libra, he's judged by Pilate. Then at the third hour, he's crucified. That would be Scorpio, and that's when Scorpion stings the sun and he begins to go out because he's crucified. But he's not completely dead. I believe this is while he's on the cross now. So he's crucified at the third hour. This is Scorpio. And the Roman soldiers pierce him with a spear. Right? Now, he didn't actually die right that moment. He died after that. But that's that Scorpio that stings the sun and it begins to go out. Sometime late October, early November. It's changed over the years because of the precession of the equinoxes. But it used to be sometime around October, somewhere in the middle of October, the end of October. So then there's another 3 hours until you get to the whale or the sea beast, where he's swallowed up for 3 days and 3 nights. And then 3 hours later, which would be 3 a.m. in the morning, he gives up the ghost, which is at the 9th hour. But he was put in the tomb, not immediately, at the 12th hour. The 12th hour then would be 12 hours of this. All this night is 12 hours long. The day is 12 hours long. So he starts off at 6 p.m. when the sun goes down in the evening, and now he's finally put in the tomb at the 12th hour, which would be 6 a.m. in the morning, which is spring, which is when Jesus died and spent literal 3 days and 3 nights in that tomb and rose on Easter. After Passover, he rose on Easter, and that's the spring equinox. And that matches perfectly with everything that we know. Jesus was representing the sun going down, and the darkness that covered the land would be midnight. Therefore, his death and resurrection happened at the winter solstice, but then he began to ascend. And he wasn't fully ascended, right, until after he came out of that tomb, and he was still ascending, because if you've got a circle at the bottom of the wheel, you're going to start ascending that mountain, the mountain of the Lord, until you get to the pinnacle, which is the summer solstice. So Jesus will continue to ascend in his Father's kingdom, and we'll all be ascending now, rather than the descent that we've been going through at the bottom of the wheel. Now we're going to be immortal, and we're going to be eternally progressing. Just like all the stars, the sun and the moon, everything, when it gets to the bottom of the wheel, it starts ascending then, and the days get brighter and brighter and brighter until spring, or the dawn. And the dawn is the resurrection, or when we get to immortality. Now you might think, well, he died on Passover. Maybe he kept ascending until Pentecost. But Pentecost represents something that happens more than a month later. And this is the wedding. This is the great wedding, and it may be 1,000, several thousand years in the reality. This is an analogy of it. So we are going to continue to ascend all the way till we get to the top of the summer solstice. That's where we get to the peak of the top of the mountain. And it couldn't have been that he only ascends until Easter or something. Like from Passover to Easter, 50 days. Because that 50 days represents far more than just, a few days. It literally is something that takes us beyond thousands of years. The great wedding could be thousands of years into the future from the days of Christ, and probably represents when Christ returns for his bride. And that would be the latter rain, or the other half of Pentecost, which represents our day. We're going to have the wedding. So Jesus has been ascending all this time. Even though he's reigning over the world, he's on the ascendancy. He's immortal now, and we're all filing into this place and getting our heavenly thrones. But the ascension isn't just something that just happens until Easter. If it's going to happen all the way till Pentecost, it's representing something far in the future. And we know this because after Jesus raised from the dead, he met them on the 8th day. And then it says that 8 days later, he met and broke bread with them. And it appears that he continued to meet with them every Sunday until finally 50 days had gone by since Passover, which was also a Sunday, because there's 7 days in a week, and every 7 days would bring you back to the Sabbath again. But this was the 8th day, or the first day of the week, that he rose on. And so that represents the eternal day, the infinite eternal day, where we're out of this cycle of death. So we got to get to the wedding, which is the immortality, which is where we're at now. When Christ is going to return, come back for his bride, this is the great Pentecost. And so we're all ascending up until that point, and then we've ascended. And we know that Jesus hadn't yet then ascended until Pentecost, as a type of the fact that the church is going to continue to progress. And when Christ returns, the great latter rain, or the great Pentecost, or the great wedding, will occur. And that will be when we all become immortal. We've arisen, finally, from this dark night of the soul. So Passover, Easter time, 2,000 years ago. Now we're going into Taurus, which is the great wedding, which will be Pentecost. And so Christ then was rising from the time he came up out of the grave, right? Now it's the dawn. It's the dawn's early light. And we're still in the dawn's early light. And we're going towards the great day of Pentecost, or the wedding. And then that's where Paul says is that the resurrection will be like the sun or the moon or the stars, and each star differeth in star and glory. We'll have immortality, the resurrection unto eternal life, but we'll still progress eternally through the houses at the top of the wheel. On the astrological wheel, the autumn equinox would be the first hour when the sun goes down at 6 p.m. That's where the scales of Libra, the judgment, occurs. So Jesus had to have been judged at the beginning of Libra, September the 21st, and that's when he came into the flesh and partook of this prison house, this flesh. He was born in the flesh September 21st, but he was also judged by Pilate. So 6 p.m., he's judged by Pilate. That's the judgment of Libra. But remember, he's only in the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights. But he died before he got into the tomb. He gave up the ghost at the 9th hour. Darkness fell over the land at the 6th hour. He gave up the ghost at the 9th hour. He was put into the tomb at the 12th hour, which would be 6 a.m. But remember, he's acting out the whole thing at spring. The whole thing was acted out at spring. So those 3 days and 3 nights that he was in the tomb at around Easter time were just him acting out everything that happened, the entire part of the whole bottom of the wheel. His trial, his murder, going into a tomb, dying 3 days and 3 nights, and then ascending. All of that was being represented just in that one little period around Passover time to Easter. And he acted all of this out that really was taking place at the bottom of the wheel for thousands of years, that we were going through this dark night of the soul at the bottom of the wheel. And so those 3 days and 3 nights that he spent in the tomb, I now see as representing the time that the sun goes out at the bottom of the wheel at the winter solstice, but not the whole period of time from the time that he was judged in Libra and was crucified in Scorpio, and then at the winter solstice, he spent 3 hours that the sun just didn't move. It didn't come up, didn't progress. And that was the time he spent in the grave. But then he began to ascend. And all this is being represented at that period of time of Passover all the way to Easter morning at dawn. And language itself is related to this astrology. So the Garden of Eden story is the astrology, or the animals that are in the garden, and man that is to have dominion over them, because we're supposed, the garden is within your body. You have to have dominion over your carnal nature. And so the path is the path of initiation through death. And Mother Eve, who later became Sophia Wisdom because she took of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, in the path. And what was the path? Well, there at Eden, in the astrological zoology zodiac, where the way to the tree of life is being guarded by the cherubim with the 4 faces, or the fixed signs of the zodiac, turning every which way, meaning literally it should be translated turning around and around, as Gilgal, or the wheel of rebirth. So all the words that are in our Bible that have come down to us today mean nothing, and you don't understand salvation. You don't understand life or why you're here, because you're looking at a book that was translated by some Gothic idiots that came from the Ashkenazis that went up there. They were all Jewish. They believed in the Judean religion and vengeance and hate and government, knew nothing of the mysteries. And these are the ones who came down in 405, destroyed Rome and took it over and made the Holy Roman Empire, which is the Germanic Empire, headquartered for a while at Constantinople. And then, of course, Hitler was the Third Reich of this Holy Roman Empire, which is not Rome. It is simply a unholy alliance of the 10 Gothic tribes, which are the 10 heads on the beast that you find in the book of Revelation. And so they burned in 405, when they took Rome, they burned the Alexandrian library in 395. They put out the flame that was always supposed to be burning. It never should have gone out. The Vestal Virgins and the Flamen priests were to keep it going. The Rex Sacrorum, which is the Latin way of saying Melchizedek, or the righteous king, solar king. And this all goes back to Egypt and Heliopolis and the Pharaoh, or the house of Ra. Pharaoh means the house of Ra, and the house of David also means the house of the sun. And it goes around the astrological wheel through the houses on a journey called the path. Now, if you understood all of this, you would know what words mean. For instance, the word righteousness. In our world, it has the meaning of being morally good and following some laws or the government or what they tell you to do. And if you don't do it, you get punished, you go to a prison. Okay, all of these things are very similar to what happened with the Jews at Mount Sinai when they were given these teachings that they would build a temple, but not with hands. Well, how can you make a temple, but not with hands? Not with hewn stone. Thou shalt not raise a chisel to the steps that are going up to an altar. It had to be natural. Now, the only natural temple is the temple of the body. It's not made with hands. It's not even this physical body, because it was made by Yahweh, or the lower ego, or the ignorance. But we're looking for the house that is not made with hands, that was immortal, our eternal physical body of light. And in that body, the divine being dwells bodily. And as that being, we start off as beings of light, and then we fall or are initiated into a path. And the path of initiation is the word righteousness. The word righteousness means a path. And that's where we'll start. All the words like sin and transgression and salvation and all the words, king, all these words, every word that we have in the world, we need to go back to the true meaning so we can understand the Bible. And it has to do with astrology, or the plan of salvation that was set forth for all of us. We're here in a classroom, and our language when we got here was a language that we would understand who we are, where we're going, and why. Now they've hidden it from us. They put it behind a veil. It's now spelled. It's a spell over you. They write it in cursive. You're cursed. And the law, or the letter of the law, is a curse in the bondage, because you do not know what the words mean any longer. And so the esoteric meaning is a lot more amazing than you think. It isn't necessarily some meaning of the word that's not really there, that you're supposed to figure out. It really means the actual meaning of the word, and to get the sense of it in its reality and not the outer letter. So, for instance, we don't have real temples. We have a spiritual temple, which is our body. And our language describes everything that we're doing. And if we have the true language, then we understand what we're actually supposed to be doing, and we can actually get somewhere. Because if you're under the impression that righteousness is to keep some moral law that you cannot keep, something that's contrary to us, which is what the Apostle Paul says, the law was contrary to us. And it's the worship of angels, because it was the fallen angel, it was the administration of angels. It was the law, the curse, the bondage. It was not good. Jesus wouldn't even bow down to Yahweh in the 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness when he said, bow down to me and I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world. You see, but we're doing that. We're bowing down to this vengeful, lustful deity, which is the lower ego. So the wrong deity. We've got to know that that deity is called the deity of this world in the Bible, in the New Testament. And he's blinding the minds of the unbelievers. And the unbelievers, how can they believe unless first they see? And this is why Jesus talked about the eyes opening. And the eyes opening is understanding. And I'm about to open your eyes today and give you the understanding. So from this point forward, henceforth, you will be able to use the words that are in the Bible and understand those aren't the right words, correct that, read it with the right words, and then you'll know the path that you're on. So what is the etymology of righteousness in the New Testament or in the Old? Well, now in the Old Testament, righteousness referred to a state of being morally right or just. How, though? How are we morally right and just? But you see, those are the wrong words. It means something about standing. standing in the presence of deity, according to his divine standards. Now, again, you start thinking, oh, okay, laws, all these laws he's got for us. That's not what it means, because you don't even know what divine means. It means light. It means enlightenment. And so it's the path of the sun in astrology that rises on the horizon and all the stars. And it's the path of all the stars that light keeps getting brighter and brighter, as the Apostle Peter says. So the primary Hebrew root for righteousness is Zadok. And that is 500 times in the Old Testament. Now, as far as its linguistic roots, that's a 3-letter verb root, which is the root word. It always has 3 letters. And it means to be just. Okay, but what does just mean? It means to be upright or straight. So the connotation is to be standing and going straight. That's the meaning of the word as far as its root. Now, what does that mean, to go straight? Well, it's imagery. And so that's why our words mean nothing, because the words we have don't image anything in our mind except for false concepts. Originally, it had nothing to do with keeping laws or anything. It had to do with going in a straight path. What? To get to the destination. And what was the destination? Well, it's the destination of the light. The light keeps getting brighter and brighter. So in Hebrew culture, it was literally described as the straight path. Remember in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, the early Christians were called the way. That word probably should be translated the path, because they were Christians. They were on the path, and they knew it was astrology, and they had all this understanding, but now the words have changed. So it describes a straight path. A righteous person is not a righteous person, if you're going to use our English word. It had nothing to do with being righteous, except that the word right is in there. And if it means that we should be right, that's true. It does mean that we're going to be right. But what is right? It means to be on the path. Because if you're on the wrong path, you're going to go in the wrong direction. And you're not going to get anywhere. Our existence is to progress, is to grow, learn, play, have fun, adventure. And so if you're going backwards, we're not going the right way. But a righteous person is one who walks correctly on the path and doesn't wander. So remember, Cain was sent to the land of Nod. So you say, oh, some land of Nod, there's a guy named Cain. Well, again, you're misunderstanding, because they won't tell you that Nod meant a wandering. And so Cain, remember, there were 7 individuals down to Lamech, whose daughter was Naamah. She was redeemed, because Cain would be punished 7 times. Well, who are those 7 sons of Cain? They are the 7 planets, the wandering stars. Why are they called wandering stars? Because they don't rise on the horizon with all the other stars. See, all the stars, the sun and the moon, and everybody rises on the horizon in spring. And that's a good thing. They were the morning stars, the stars that rose at dawn. But there were some stars that we call planets today that didn't quite go along with the plan. They were wandering. And there are 7 planets. So, early Hebrew had some kind of concrete imagery. And it was astrology, but most Jews today do not know that. They've lost their meanings. They've lost the meaning of their language, just as we have. Far more today, because we speak English, we do not know what we're here for. That our entire language, all human language, was made for us as a way to get back on the path, or to stay on the path. Because our purpose here is to be on the path. The fact that you're in this world is because you're on a path. And if you don't have the tools, the helmet of salvation, the shield of faith, the sword of the truth, and all of that you need, because it's a battle. So there's various analogies about what we're doing here. We're battling like soldiers. We're adventurers on a path leading to enlightenment. And these kinds of words, we'll go through some of them as we go. So, Zadok refers to what is straight in conjunction with us walking. Therefore, it means the right path. That's the objective sense. It also might apply to things like weights and measures. You are going to walk the straight path, and therefore you would be straight in all your dealings. Now, then there's the tzedakah, which is the feminine, and it's also used to conduct charitable giving, giving alms, loving your neighbor. But that's how the word took on extra meaning. But at its root, it means a straight path. Theologically, it means to be on the right path with the community, to fulfill the obligations of deity? No. Deity doesn't mean some man with a beard. It means to fulfill your obligation with enlightenment, with knowledge, with progress. If you're not progressing, you're going backwards. So in a sense, even if you're not walking, you've got to be going straight in the right direction, because even if it's a moral direction, it doesn't have to be physically winding through a trail on a path, though that is the picture that you should have in your mind for that word. It relates to your moral path as well. Now, in the New Testament, which is far more important for us, it is used to translate the word dike or dikosin. And the etymology of it is said to be justice or order. So what is justice? Every one of these words mean nothing because, say, oh, it means justice. Oh, okay, got it. Well, what's justice mean? Well, justice means the right order. So the etymology is a judicial verdict. But again, that's in the type. A real judge, an actual physical judge, is not what it's talking about. It's talking about the decision. Dika we get the word decision. So it is a decision, and it is a choice. It is a choosing. And it is choosing the right or the proper order, progression. So you've got secular and biblical. Secular Greek, people like Aristotle, that wasn't a Christian, although, that's kind of silly because he was very spiritual, and he had the original priesthood, which is the same as the Christian mystery schools. And so when we look at Aristotle, we're actually finding out far more clearly what these words mean than if we were to somehow look at some guy that was translating Greek 500 years ago. They wouldn't know. They've all lost the understanding that the Bible is about astrology and it goes back to Egypt, because that was covered over in the first century, after the first century. So it doesn't really mean anything about civic or civil or government. That government that you see is only the outward letter of that spiritual truth. So the real government is the spiritual reality, not some humans trying to mimic the reality. We're under the law of nature and not this law of man. So yes, it does, and people will say it has to do with your standing towards God, deity. But then we'd have to go through the whole spiel about how God's not even the word that was there, and the word God today means nothing about what we're supposed to be understanding with that word. So some people will then claim it's a legal status. When a judge slams down his gavel, that's justice, that kind of thing. But they're only mimicking justice, and it's very poor. It has nothing to do with true righteousness. Because according to the Bible and the Apostle Paul, our righteous standing is a gift. It is something that was already given to us. We have it already. We're all standing and beholding his glory right now in that spiritual realm. This outer realm, and especially even further out, when you're getting at society, when you're looking at society and judges and presidents and governments, you're looking at a dead letter of the law, a misunderstanding, a veiling of the truth. So, it's right living. It's a relationship with enlightenment and progress. It is being on the right path. So we can say that the Old Testament meant to be on the correct path, a straight path to a destination. And the New Testament uses its word that we have in the Greek, diki, to translate the same word, or to be on the path. So it's a word that in the first century, the Christians understood as a path or a way, a road that they were called to. In the book of Acts, it tells us that they were originally called the way or the path because they were the people of the path. And Jesus spoke of the broad way that leads to death and a narrow way that leads to life. Well, the Old Testament says that the path of the righteous gets brighter and brighter and seems to mean we are on a path, the path of the stars, through the night to rise on the horizon at dawn, the light. Then we have Melchizedek. In fact, the word Zadok, some scholars believe it originally had something to do with a path of light, which is cyclical, like a circle. Sickle, circle comes from the same root. So Melchizedek or Zadok means the right path or the right priesthood that leads us to the right path. Melchizedek is not as much a priesthood as it was a way of life or a path. And Jesus said, I am the path, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life, because he was the solar king. And the solar king is what Jesus was. And Christians do not understand he is that solar king. So the path was originally set by Thoth. Thoth means thought in English. It was like our word logos. In fact, the idea in John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with deity, is taken right out of the Emerald Tablets and this whole teaching about Thoth, who is the one who went down into the halls of Amenti and overcame death and rose again. That's Jesus. And it refers all the way back to Enoch. So the path was set by Thoth, or originally Enoch in our Bible, or the king, Melchizedek, Zadok, or the path of the righteous king. So therefore, in both the Old Testament and in the New Testament, the concept of righteousness is inextricably linked to the physical and metaphorical imagery of a path or a way. Now, in the Old Testament, it meant a straight path, as we've said, like a straight course. The Hebrew thought, or the concept of righteousness, Zadok, was not merely an abstract moral quality then, but it was a concrete movement on a path or route. Now, we have physical imagery, and this is what language is, but we don't have it anymore. So the Hebrew root means to be straight, person who is walking straight. It meant following a correct path and not departing from it. So the path of light in Proverbs chapter 4 and verse 18 describes the journey, the path of the righteous. This is quote, Proverbs 4:18. The path of the righteous is like the first gleam of the dawn, shining brighter and brighter until midday. So that suggests that this is a progressive journey towards increasing clarity and divine light. So friends, wherever you are, some of you may feel discouraged. You haven't made any progress that you can think of. Well, you're in a very rough course. You know, when you finally get, a friend of mine yesterday, I think, said, when you're getting close to the top of the mountain, that's when it gets the hardest. But you got to keep going because you're almost to the top. So it's a progressive journey. We're going to have increasing clarity, but there's going to be times when we're not going to be able to be very happy about the situation. It might be very difficult. But remember, you've climbed all this way. That's why it's so dang difficult. You're getting close. It's hard. Keep on going. You're almost there. It's a cyclical thing. Some linguistic studies suggest that the Hebrew word that we're talking about, that means path, which is magal, in Psalms 23:3, it can also mean a circle or a cycle, and that's the cycle of rebirth. And that's the cycle that everything in the universe takes. Everything is a cycle, right? There's a time to be born, a time to die. A time for light, and a time for darkness, a time to eat, and a time to sleep, and all of these things, they come and they go as cycles. You breathe in, you breathe out. You breathe in, you breathe out. You live, you sleep, you get up in the morning, and you live some more. But we all got to rest. It's a circle, a cycle, and it's the cycle of our life. And Jesus is the path in the cycle, the solar king. So in the New Testament, it's called the way of Christ. The followers of the way in Acts, which is the word hodos in Greek, this idea wasn't just something they made up, but it was because Jesus told them, he declared, I am the way, I am the truth, and the life. You might wonder, why did Jesus say I am the way, and then say I am the truth, and then say I am the life? How do those three words correlate? Well, we're on a path, the way. And what is the way? Well, it's the truth. And what is the point? It's the life. The life we have is to be going on the path to truth. And Jesus says, speaking as our elder brother who was crucified from the founding of the world, and who was first in all things, and partook of flesh and blood as did his brethren, he started the path first of all, the firstborn among many brethren, which is Abel, which means my father is El. And he started the path and began to go forth, and he therefore is truly the way, because we follow him. And that's why he says, come and follow me. And for those of you who think, well, it's all esoteric, we don't have to believe in Jesus. Well, you're wrong, because Jesus is the path. If you don't know the meanings of these words, nor the people who instituted and started the path, if you don't have your heroes, if you don't know who your father and mother was, if you don't have anyone that can guide you along the path, you're not going to make it. You cannot do it alone. We're a body of many members. No man is an island. So it's a narrow path, Jesus said. He explicitly said, and he contrasted it with this broad way. Now the broad way leads to what? Destruction. What does that mean? Eternal damnation, burning in hell? No. It means you're off the path and you're not going the right direction, and it might not be a good deal, because that path may go through flames, but if you stay on the path, you won't get burned. It may go through brambles, but you stay on the path, you won't get stung. You see, there's a path that's made for us. And what is the path? It's the path that Jesus made when he died. It's the path of Jesus, who was the firstborn among many brethren. That's the path. We follow Jesus, our Lord. We take up our cross and follow him. So, the narrow way that leads to life, that's in Matthew chapter 7, verse 13. That is a specific, disciplined course of our conduct. So those of you who say, well, if you don't believe in the law of Moses, then what do you do? How do you guide yourselves down the path? Well, we discipline ourselves. We follow after the Spirit and not after the flesh. So Melchizedek, he is the king of the right path. That's what the word means. Meli, king, Zadok, or the righteous path. See, righteous means the path, the righteous way. So the name Melchizedek, my king, is the righteous path, or takes the righteous path, and we follow him, the way to glory. So you see, the Melchizedek priesthood isn't just some priesthood. That's what the Levitical priesthood was. Just some priesthood, just some guys out there in robes doing rituals and all of this. We don't find a lot of rituals and ceremonies. What we find out about the Zadokite priests was that they were not to eat meat. They weren't to drink wine. Now, they did have a mixture that they used in their sacrament. We're not going to get into that. But they did not follow the Mosaic law, meaning they didn't follow the law at all. They followed the Spirit, which is love, the divine Spirit, the path of light and progression. It didn't matter if you fell down, you got back up. It doesn't matter if you bump your knee. Don't sit around complaining like a child. Every child's got to learn to walk. Don't be discouraged. You've got to get up and walk and be on the right path. And as long as you're on the right path and you're determined to keep going, you're on the right path. And that is the path of a Christian. So because Melchizedek appears without genealogy, with no beginning of days or the end of life, he is seen as the type of the eternal Christ, which represents a path or a spiritual power, an indestructible life, rather than a mere religious ritual. He's not just a religious ritual. He's not just some king that did some little sacred rituals. Yes, the Rex Sacrorum, or the Rex King of the sacrament, or the Sacrorum, or the rituals, or the ceremonies, or the principles, were only outward signs and ceremonies to teach spiritual things. They were baptism, which is what? Cleansing. The whole world went through the flood, which was to cleanse the outside of the cup. But then we go through a spiritual cleansing, which is done by fire. Not real fire. The fire burns metal to hard substances and gets rid of the dross and makes it pure. So we're talking about our actual being, the elemental being, that which remains, the purity that is left after everything and all the suffering and everything we've gone through. What's left is our true, essential, pure being. So, how then is all of this related to the Egyptian path or the Egyptian way? Because that's where it all started, where Enoch or Jesus, remember, he was Abel. Abel died right away with no genealogy. So that's Melchizedek. No genealogy, right? And he lived before there was even sin in the world, right? He was the firstborn son of Adam and Eve before sin even got started in the world. Because sin got started with his brother who tried to kill him, which is the higher spiritual mind that is put to sleep by the lower conscious mind. So it all goes back to the original language, which is the original priesthood. And it is a language of words. It is righteousness, the son of righteousness. It's the dawn, the solar king, the pharaoh, which means fair, the house of Ra. Pharaoh means the house of Ra. The word David also has roots in the term divine. Diva, dia, deity, theos, a day or light. The house of David is the house of Ra. It's the same path of the sun and the stars that go around in the cycle, the circle, or the path of light that gets brighter and brighter till dawn in our hearts. Now, Peter, in the book of Peter, he seems to be saying that the meaning of this word is a path. He seems to clearly teach that the meaning of this word is to be getting brighter and progressing on a path towards the light, because it's the day star that will dawn in our hearts. So it is a path around the astrological wheel and the houses that are in the wheel. And the Pharaoh, the house of light, are the houses of the astrological wheel. Now, these biblical words are related to astrology and the houses. And that is related to your soul. The soul, spelled S-O-U-L, is related to the word S-O-L, which is the Latin way to say the sun. Because your soul is that bright consciousness of being that goes around and around, goes through the darkness, and then rises on the wheel and progresses. And it goes through the astrological wheel too. As it goes around, it progresses in dispensations and long periods and aeons. We progress. So it's the houses of being. And so our consciousness goes through it, goes through the darkness, dies on a cross, which the cross has to do with astrology, the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. And then it is raised again in spring. It's raised up and it's reborn. And this is that fertility rite of Astarte, Ishtar, Easter that we celebrate in spring. So all of our words today mean nothing. They really mean nothing other than trying to teach you or mesmerize you or indoctrinate you into some false teaching. We've been initiated by the dark occult into the teachings of Yahweh, or the occult, which is the dark sayings of the devil. And we're taught that we're good for nothing, slaves, we're born in sin, we deserve to go to prison, or to die, or to be fed poison, or to be raped, pillaged, and mistreated because we're all a bunch of dogs or goyim. That's what the language is that you're reading and thinking right now. And that's why you feel depressed. It's not because you are depressed. You ever seen a child that hasn't learned a lot yet? They jump up in the morning and run out, throw the covers off, run out the door, and they're playing and they're having fun. It's pretty hard to discourage a child. Just like a puppy or a kitten. You can't discourage them. They keep coming back for more. So we finally get discouraged as we get older because we're told we're a slave. We got to go to work. We got to do this. We got to do that. We got to act this way, look that way. It all depends on if you can please somebody else. But we're not, or the lower ego, right? Lust or pride or anything. So the language we have today has been transformed. It's been diluted. All the words mean almost the opposite of what they originally meant. But the original words, let's take a word like sin. Today we think, oh, you sinned. You're a sinner. Bad boy. Bad girl. You're not no good. You're bad. You sinned. Ooh. What does it mean? Well, you transgressed the law of God. You're going to go to hell now. You're a bad person. The Lord's very angry with you. None of that's true. The Lord's not angry with you. And there is no such thing as sin in that sense. That's a misunderstanding of the word. Sin in the New Testament, they always tell you it means missing the mark. Well, what does that mean, missing the mark? It means that Orion in astrology is a bow. He's got some arrows and he's trying to shoot the arrow to hit the bull's eye, which is Taurus. Now, do you think when that archer shoots an arrow and he misses the bullseye, do you think he stops there and gets discouraged and go home? No. If you don't keep shooting, you ain't going to get the animal and you ain't going to eat that day. The archer, the hunter, has got to learn how to get what he's shooting at, or else he's going to die. So this is the analogy here. We've got to be able to learn. It's a practice. Sin is, oh, I didn't practice well. I made a mistake and I failed. And now I'm going to go die. No, it means, okay, I see now that I was off to the left. I better shoot a little more to the right. Tomorrow we'll get up and do it again. We'll do it better. So sin is the missing of the mark. Now, how about the word transgression? It's related to a path. We must not fall down or off the path. Right? That's what the word means, to fall down. There's various words that have to do with transgression, sin, even the word apostasy. And we'll get to that word. But it has to do with being on a path and either falling down or falling off the path. There's several variations of it that they translate in various ways in the New Testament. Now, related to that is the word repent. Again, a lot of people think that repent means you're a sinner, you're bad, you're no good, the Lord don't love you, and if you don't repent, you're going to die and go to hell. But that isn't what it means. Isn't it crazy? It means to turn around. But people say that, right? Oh, it means to turn around, right? Change your mind. Well, change your mind for what? What are we supposed to, how do we know which way to go? Well, we got to go on the path. You got off the path or turned around. Now you got to turn around and go on the right direction. Remember the narrow way. Don't go the road that everybody else is going, because they're all wandering around like Cain. Now, Cain, he wasn't cast off forever. No, in 7 generations, he was redeemed. He had to pay for his wandering. He got off the path. It took some time to get caught up with the rest of the crew until he realized and he turned around. and repented or turned around in his mind and got back on the path. There's no shame to any of it. In fact, it's only a physical, human, carnal being that can make mistakes. Because if you're in your spiritual paradisical glory, your mind sees all, knows all, and never makes mistakes. But you see, we live in the world of adventure so that we can train up our conscious mind. We like living in a world where there's secrets, adventure. We want to play, right? We want to, take the covers and make a fort and crawl under there and pretend. We're humans we're immortal beings that want to have fun. We want to play. We want to have adventure. The meaning of life is joy, and that's it. That's the meaning of our life in this world. That's the reason we're here, is to go and have joy. And the fullness of joy is the spirit and the body inseparably joined. So sin is the missing of the mark. So we don't want to fall down, get off the path. Therefore, we've got to turn around, get back on the path. Now, then you got the word apostasy. And again, some people say, oh, they're apostate. You can never speak to them again. They did it on purpose. Off with their head. They're gone. They're nothing to us. They're dead to us. That is not what it means. It means we're all on the path, and some people get off the path, they get back on, that's fine. But the worst of the lot are the ones who don't just fall down, but they go off the path and they start going the wrong way. Right? And then they start leading people in the wrong way. Now we have to counsel them. We have to take it very seriously. Even to charge them not to do these things anymore. We have to warn them, but not condemn them forever. We're not anyone's judge. Jesus said we're not the judge of anyone. But we do judge things that are good and evil in our life. That's what we're here for, to learn how to judge between good and evil. We don't judge souls because why? Because we know that all the souls of the Lord are his children. So we can't judge somebody because they're all the children of the Lord. We don't judge an apostate. But what we do is we judge that what they're doing is wrong, and we warn people not to go in that direction. And we warn the people that are doing the wrong themselves. So the Apostle Paul says of someone who was a fornicator, meaning he was a prostitute, and remember that word doesn't mean just some kind of sexual sin of any kind. Fornication meant prostitution. Porneia didn't mean just being naked or touching somebody when they were naked or anything like that. Porneia had to do with a prostitution, buying and selling humans and trafficking children. That's what porneia had to do with. And this man, it said that he committed fornication, or he did some kind of prostitution with his own mother. And that was really bad. And the Apostle Paul says, hand such a one unto Satan. What is that? The government. The carnal vengeance of this world. Hand him over for the destruction of the flesh, that his spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord. Because everyone's going to be saved in the day of the Lord. And guys, we're in the day of the Lord now. This is the judgment, or the last days, the great white throne judgment that we see in the book of Revelation. And we're all going to be judged, and we're all going to get our white robes because we've gone through the class. But not everyone are going to graduate at the same time. There will be some who are ready to graduate immediately, and others it might take a little longer to get their white robe. Maybe they got to take a couple of extra courses or something like that. This is why Jesus said after he returns, he's going to separate the sheep from the goats, and some shall be beaten with a few stripes, and others will be beaten with many. So there are still going to be a few that will need to learn. So the concept of the gospel, or the good news that the New Testament constantly talks about, preaching the good news, the gospel, is not just some word that Paul invented. The gospel was the message that was in astrology. The gospel, the good news, came from Enoch before the flood, Thoth. And it was written in the great temple of the Lord in the midst and the border thereof in Egypt. That is the great temple of Thoth. And it portrayed and is etched into the walls in the hieroglyphs, or the holy writing, hiero meaning holy, glyph meaning writing. There is in the walls the gospel. which is the Pharaoh or the houses, or Ra, who goes through the houses, right? That Melchizedek priesthood on the pathway of light. And it's the gospel that's in the stars, or the message or the good news that's written in the stars by Enoch. That suggests that the biblical narrative and the linguistic roots are deeply intertwined, guys, with the Egyptian. And they're talking about the solar king that goes through the sky and all the stars. And it's the Egyptian solar worship. It's the astrological cycles. So you can see, guys, that the Bible's an allegory for the soul's journey through the houses of the zodiac. And it's mirroring the path of the sun or the solar king. Now, yes, a lot of Hebrew scholars say that the etymology of David derives from D-O-D, Dod, which they say means the beloved. But that's not true. The word David does not mean the beloved. It's a lot of these words that they claim it means this or that. Like they'll say Baal means Lord. They'll say Molech means Lord. They'll say El means Lord, or everything's, if they don't know what it means. And the reason why is because they know kind of what it means. There was a Lord that might have had that name. There was a Baal in the days of Jezebel that Elijah didn't like, but it wasn't the worship of a false deity, Baal. Yahweh was called Baal. I will be no longer Baal, but I'll be Ishi, your man. Baal just means the master or the owner of that. Under the law, it was the one that was your master, or I guess your Lord. So that particular Lord was a worship of humans, or a man who was a king who wanted worship. So that Jezebel wasn't the worship of a false deity named Baal. In that era, in the book of Daniel, talks about Bel or Baal. We've got one of the Daniel books that's called Bel and the Dragon, and it's Baal. So who was this Baal that's in Babylon? Well, that was Marduk, the son of Yahweh. So Baal can mean different people. It just means the Lord. And so when Elijah was trying to get rid of Baal worship, right, at Baalbek, or the house of Baal, it wasn't the house of a deity. It was a worship of men and government. So they're wrong about a lot of these things. The astro-theological lens that you have to look through to understand these words and go back to the original astrological meanings, that's where you're going to find the real truth. So the Proto-Indo-European root, like duos, meant celestial or shining. Dios, like dies. It meant shining or bright. And that's the root. That's the Sanskrit root diva, Latin deus, and Greek theos. And that's the word David too. So the house of David is the house of Ra. So from this point of view, the house of David is synonymous with the house of Ra. They're the same thing. The solar path through the 12 zodiacal astrological houses travels through the houses, dying at the winter solstice, or the cross of astrology, and then being reborn as the son of deity, or the son on the path of righteousness. That's reborn in spring to shine as the dawn. So then we have the Greek word for sin, hamartia, which is also martia, almost sounds like mark, but because these words are very related, but it means missing the mark. So now, there are a lot of these words, all the words go back to this. So we've got Horus. That's where we get the word hours, because it has to do with the houses or the hours in the wheel. So Horus is the hours. Well, what goes through the hours or the chambers or the houses? The sun or the stars. And so the English word hour is linked to Horus. It's also where we get the word horoscope or the hour scope. Horror meaning your, that sounds like a bad word. Horror, right? Like a horror house. Because this is the what we're going through in this world. It's horror. It's the wheel of roulette. The wheel of chance, good and evil. and you spin the wheel and see what you get. You've got to advance and stay on the right path. It's all in there. Now, here's a really important thing. Remember when Jesus was born, they saw his star rise in the east. Very few people realized that the star was rising in the east. Why is it rising in the east? Well, there's a word used in Matthew chapter 2, verse 2. It says, we have seen his star in the east. And that word is antoli. It refers to the heliacal rising of a star. It has to do with astrology. And these were 3 astrologers that saw the heliacal rising of the star. The moment it becomes visible, just before dawn, and that is something that goes back to the Egyptians, that's astrology, that has nothing to do with what Christians today think. They saw the star wandering around, maybe it was a spaceship, and they followed it. They weren't following a star. They were astrologers, and they saw the star rise in the east. And the star was the star of the dawn that was the marker for Aries or Orion. Orion's the one with the bow. He's the practiced archer. He's perfected it. He's rising on the dawn, and right beside him, rising at dawn, is Isis, the star we call Sirius today. It's the brightest star in the sky, and that's our mother Eve. Then the Egyptians have the word Mat. Mat is a goddess, Mat, which is where we get word matter. Remember, Tiamat was time and matter. 7 heads and 10 horns. The 10 horns are the matter, the space. You have 10 fingers, it's math. It's the multiplication of space, of things. Time is a different thing than space and matter. It's mental. It's time. So Mat is also a woman, and that's the physical. Mother Earth is a woman. Mat is the goddess of truth, and she's the goddess of balance. So that would be Mary Magdala, who had the, scales in her hand, which is justice, but it's not justice like what we were saying. It's not earthly justice, but it's the right path. And that's Libra, right? Or liberty, right? The whole idea of liberty and justice for all came from Libra, which is Mary Magdala, the wife of Jesus Christ. And so Mary Magdalene in France is what started this concept of liberty and fraternity. And that Statue of Liberty is standing out there in the ocean, which is our divine mother Eve. And she's crowned with the stars, right? She's crowned with the 12 stars upon her head. So the goddess of truth, balance, the path of righteousness, that's what that torch is representing, the light that we follow, and that's the light of the solar king. That's the cosmic order. Now, the zodiac, in Greek, it meant the circle of the little animals. And that, then, is something that the Bible is clearly about. And that's what the Bible's about, friends. It's not some, doctrinal teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses or some Protestant religion that has forgotten all of this. They've all become apostate. Virgo, now remember, there are 2 women right close together, Virgo and Libra. Virgo is the Virgin Mother. That's Mary, the mother of Jesus. That's Eve. And then Libra, that we just talked about, is Mary Magdala, the wife of Jesus Christ. So the city of Bethlehem is the house of Virgo. And so she's at the side of the wheel as it starts to go down. And as soon as the Virgin Mother gave birth to Jesus, they went down into Egypt. And that's down there where the Pharaoh knew not Joseph and began to make them slaves. And that's where we had to go through the long, dark night. And we rise on the horizon. So Bethlehem is called the house of bread, and that's linked to the constellation Virgo. The harvest, which is the end of the age as well. The word that we translate repent, and it just means to change or turn around in the path, as we said. So apostasy, it means to fall away or fall off the path completely and turn around and teach people false things. And that's why I'm so worried about Joshua, because I love him as a friend and I don't want him to be an apostate. So we're on the solar journey. It's the solar journey of the soul, whether it's S-O-L or S-O-U-L, it's the same. It's the path of light described in 2 Peter 1:19, the eternal day star, which is that word phosphorus, and that's the light bringer. We came into the world. We're the light bringers. The sons are the morning stars. The book of Job says all the morning stars clap their hands for joy. We're all the morning stars. All the stars. Every one of them. Right? All the stars are going to rise on the horizon. Every one of them. Every person you ever meet in this world is a child of the living deity. The only ones who don't are the wandering stars. And what is that? Well, those are the carnal flesh. But, the subtle bodies.
Oh, look at the time.
And
we have gone
put them
far, way
And
over.
we transmigrate.
I hate it when I do
and
that.
We raise our vibrations
like a lot of you
to the highest place, which is where the sun is.
Usually it's the last part that's the most important. But I got to go. And I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful evening and a happy new year. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Lord loves you. His grace and his peace will be with you. Have a good one.